not by video link, but by audio only, to Philip Dunne.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and my apologies that my internet crashed a little while ago, so I'm grateful to you for letting me participate orally. And I'm very pleased to contribute to this debate the day after the Prime Minister has confirmed that the country will move to the next stage of relaxation of restrictions on Monday after 14 months of COVID-dominated disruption to our daily lives. But also in the week after such a seismic set of midterm elections with such strong waves of support for the government, not just across most of England, but with gains in Scotland and Wales, and of course the blue wave through which I'm pleased to welcome the Honourable Member for Hartlepool to these benches. The focus of the government's programme is delivery of manifesto commitments from the general election 18 months ago, meeting the aspirations of people across every part of Britain, including in rural areas which have so often been left behind. The levelling up agenda needs to reach beyond Whitehall, not just to the great urban centres of the North and the Midlands, but to rural communities everywhere. I was pleased to see publication before Easter of the Rural Proofing Policy Paper, and will look for these principles to be applied to the 30 bills outlined in the gracious speech as these pass through this House. Before I turn to the main thrust of my remarks, I'd just briefly like to welcome the Health and Care Bill, which will build on the new ways of working brought in to cope with the pandemic to improve outcomes for patients by focusing on prevention and closer collaboration within the NHS and with local authorities. But on social care, we must make progress during this session to develop a long-term plan and then legislate during this Parliament, as other honourable members have said. Current funding mechanisms are causing real pressure on families of those who require residential and domiciliary care, as well as on local authorities whose budgets are increasingly dominated by the costs of providing care. I particularly welcome the procurement bill. As a former minister with responsibility for procurement in both defence and health departments, this will allow for the public sector to be able deliberately to buy British when this makes sense and represents value for money, which we could not do, even for food and drink, when subject to EU procurement rules. I'd like to focus my remarks this evening on environmental measures, including the focus on green jobs as the economy recovers, where the committee I chair will soon be making recommendations to the government. The animal welfare provisions are welcome and will deliver on specific manifesto pledges. And I particularly welcome reintroduction of the Vital Environment Bill, which was a casualty of COVID, preventing its passage in the last session. This establishes the new overarching regulator for the environment following Brexit. And I'm pleased that my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State, has set up the new Office for Environmental Protection in shadow form to start undertaking its work. But the main issue I wish to welcome is today's announcement by the government that it will introduce 3 amendments to the Environment Bill to take forward the principal objectives of my private member's bill, the Sewage Inland Waters Bill, another casualty of COVID, as its second reading was deferred 5 times and so ran out of parliamentary time in the last session. The Environment Minister has shown admirable determination to support me, the 135 other members across this House, and the almost 45,000 members of the public who signed a petition to end sewage pollution, to address the truly shocking state of our sewage and drainage infrastructure. The spotlight of data transparency has begun to reveal the state of water quality in our rivers. On the 31st of March, the Environment Agency published the astonishing admission from water companies, detected by monitoring equipment progressively installed in the last few years at sewage treatment plants and other drainage assets, that raw sewage was discharged into our rivers on over 400,000 occasions for more than 3 million hours during 2020. Much of this was done within the limits permitted by the Environment Agency. In effect, the water companies have been licensed to spill. The reasons for this are complex, but reflect a lack of adequate investment in our drainage infrastructure to keep pace with housing and commercial development since the 1960s. The consequences for the aquatic environment and the species reliant on our waterways are increasingly devastating. I don't have time to go into the causes and effects here, but I am genuinely delighted that the government has adopted the principles of my bill, and I shall monitor its progress carefully through the remaining report stage in this House and its passage through the other place. I was also pleased to hear the Prime Minister this afternoon highlight the role of the new infrastructure bank in levelling up investment to modernise the country's infrastructure. There will be plenty of opportunities to help fund creaking and leaking sewage and drainage infrastructure, much reliant on the legacy of our Victorian forebears. Levelling up needs to accommodate digging down if we're to improve water quality and meet the binding environmental targets. I look forward to scrutinising the implementing legislation for these targets, which the government committed to today. And while we debate a programme of legislation for the next 12 months, it's understandably difficult to lift our eyes to targets set for at least 3 parliaments from now. But the actions taken by the government now will be crucial to how and whether we can get back on track to meet the government's ambitious interim target for emissions reduction, announced as our nationally determined contribution for the COP26 conference this November. The draft statutory instrument setting the level of the UK's 6th carbon budget for the period from 2033 to 37 was laid shortly before prorogation and must be put to the House for approval by the end of June. And this envisaged a reduction in UK total emissions of 78% by 2035 compared to the 1990 baseline. Madam Deputy Speaker, there is no greater environmental protection target than the one the House will shortly be invited to agree. It does not require primary legislation, so was not in the gracious speech. My honourable friend, the Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury, recently told our committee that the government cannot spend its way to net zero. I happen to believe that while there is a place for legislation, we cannot rely on legislation to achieve net zero either. But the strategies and measures to be published by ministers in this session ahead of COP26 will be so crucial in setting the policies required to deliver climate change targets over several sessions to come. We shall also look to my right honourable friend, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, in his net zero review, how he plans to balance as equitably as possible the contribution of households and businesses and public funds towards different elements of the transition to net zero. To paraphrase a renowned finance minister from another age, the government's objective must be to secure the largest possible reduction in emissions with the least hissing.